Welcome back, Weirds and Weeaboos, to the channel The Bitch and Doge, where today I want to do a bit of a just general yap about Mizuki in particular. Of course, most of you already will know, but this season's been really big for Overwatch. We got 5 new characters at once, and of course most people have been raving about Jetpack Cat. That's understandable. Jetpack Cat is definitely the character that's the biggest game changer out of these 5, and is obviously also the funniest. But seriously, I do feel like Mizuki has been extremely overlooked because of the fact that Jetpack Cat has been taking all the attention in the support role. Now, the reason I say that is I'm going to be quite honest. Mizuki might have been my favourite of the 5 new characters, which is probably a shock to most people, considering a lot of people seem to have just kind of brushed him under the rug. People don't seem to be all too passionate about him. It's not even necessarily that people hate him, it just seems like there isn't a whole lot of interest around him. But I've played a decent amount of Mizuki, and I have found him to be really fun. I must admit, though, I'm constantly put in this position where I want to say this character is underrated, but I also feel like I have to acknowledge the fact that while I feel like I get to do a lot on this character, and that I have a lot of fun on them, there have been plenty of games where, statistically speaking, I have done a lot. I've kept my deaths low, I've got a lot of healing done, I've got a lot of damage done, I've got a lot of kills, and I'm hitting almost every chain. But we still lose. It doesn't feel good. And for a while I wasn't really sure how to feel about that. Like, am I still doing something wrong on this character even though my stats look good? Or is it just like, oh, well, it's a new season, there's loads of, like, people who haven't played in years coming on, you're gonna get worse teammates, maybe it's just a team diff. And I'll admit, I took some time to see what some other people had to say about Mizuki, and watch some other videos of what people had to say about them. And I feel like it gave me some things to bounce off of. To be fair, I think the fact that we got 5 new characters at once made it so that the kind of way that I assess a new character and what makes them good or bad kind of went out the window, because I was kind of just scrambling between all the new stuff. So I think the big mistake I made when I was trying to look at whether Mizuki was good or not was I didn't do the same thing that I did with Wu Yang. You might remember that I was actually a little bit of a skeptic about Wu Yang, and I was definitely a little bit wrong there. I thought that Wu Yang was not bad, but kinda mid and being overrated. I still to this day think that how strong he was pretty overstated, and I do feel like that mostly bears out in the statistics, but I obviously also have to admit, he clearly was meta. He wasn't hard meta, but he was meta, and I was denying that, so I was definitely a little bit wrong there. But a big reason why I wasn't really on the hype train around Wu Yang and not really thinking he was going to be that strong was because of the fact I just thought, so we figured out this guy is generally played as a main support, which, again, long conversation if you don't already know what that means, but it's not based on healing. I can't get into that tangent in this video, that's too long. I'm sorry if you're going to be a bit lost here. But if the other main supports, at least the ones that are actually competitively viable, are Lucio and Brig, when do you want Wu Yang over these two? Because, yeah, sure, Wu Yang can do more damage, and Wu Yang has pretty good heals and all that, but in terms of utility, and a lot of the times utility is the more important part of being a main support, Wu Yang is actually pretty terrible. Like, especially Lucio to me just seemed better. You'd run Lucio in a lot of the same kind of teams you'd run Wu Yang in, typically. Lucio already paired amazingly with Kiriko, and Wu Yang often wants to be run with Kiriko, so I felt like Lucio Kiri was just better than Wu Yang Kiri, and Lucio just has way better displacement, way better speed boosts, still can DPS pretty hard, even if not quite as much as Wu Yang, but still pretty damn good, and still has a pretty good ultimate. So overall, I felt like Lucio was just a bad pick. And while I definitely overstated the case a little bit, I still feel a little bit vindicated on that point, considering the longer the meta went on, the more people moved away from Wu Yang Kiri into Lucio Kiri. So I know I've gone on a tangent about Wu Yang here, but essentially I think I made the mistake with Mizuki of not thinking of it in the same way. I didn't really consider whether Mizuki is going to be a flex or a main support, and to be honest, I'm still a little bit unsure, but I'm going to guess he's going to land in the main support category. And if he does land in the main support category, we've got the same dilemma. You've got other options. You've got Lucio, Brig, and Wu Yang. What does Mizuki do to differentiate himself from those? And I think that's the big issue. Mizuki does have a lot of stuff where if you just judge it on like a flat playing field, it seems pretty decent. He doesn't have very bursty damage, but he has very consistent damage output that can be hard to avoid, especially in close quarters. He does have very good CC, he has amazing AoE heals, and he has an ultimate which is unfortunately a little bit overly defensive, but at the very least if you can use it defensively, it is very powerful. Combined with a form of mobility that allows him to take some very aggressive angles safely because he can teleport out, and that means that, yeah, Mizuki seems like a pretty strong character. I think the biggest issue here, though, is most main supports that are actually good usually don't just deal damage and healing, but are also providing a lot of utility to the team. And I don't really think Mizuki has a lot of that. In fairness, Wu Yang had the same issue, but I think in Wu Yang's case, the fact that he has so much more damage and healing really helped him stay in the game. Mizuki has a bit of an issue where, yes, he's not really bad. I think this character is being kind of underrated, in that it seems most people seem to think he's garbage, and I think that is a little bit of a skill issue, potentially. I mean, I don't think he's particularly easy. I'm not saying he's the hardest character in the game, but I don't think he's an easy character to pick up and play, and I think that I've taken to him a lot more easily just because of the fact that his chain feels almost identical to Brig Whipshot, and in some ways I even think that his playstyle is a little similar to Anna. And Anna and Brig are my two most played supports, so I think the skills just transferred a lot more easily for me than maybe for some other people. I will say, I'm not saying this just to dog on people, especially because it's a new season, and a lot of these people have probably never touched the character before, so it's not really to, kick them while they're down. But I will say, I have literally not seen a single Mizuki that is positive in this entire game yet, except me. It seems most people who have picked up Mizuki have been having a hard time. So yeah, because I've seen most people who've picked him up have done pretty poorly with him, but I've been doing okay, I've been tempted to say he's being underrated, and I do think he's at least being a little bit underrated. But yeah, it's clear to see there might be a reason why so many people touch this character and then collapse and then never touch him again. Without a speed boost like Lucio has, and yes, I know he has a major perk which gives him a speed aura, but a major perk comes in pretty late in the game, so it's not super reliable. So yeah, without a speed aura like Lucio, he's lacking a lot of utility. He does have CC with his chain, and you might think that that would be really good for him. I thought it would be pretty good for him, especially considering that Brig is mostly useful for her CC and knockback to protect your other support. I thought that Mizuki would be a good middle spot between playing Brig, but also being able to play a bit more aggressively because you still have a reliable ranged attack. The problem is that while the CC from the chain is stronger than a knockback from Whipshot, Whipshot is a 4-second cooldown. And I don't remember it off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure the chain is a 12-second cooldown, which is really long. I must admit I sympathise a lot with the devs here, because considering it is a CC ability, Chain would feel very frustrating to play against if it was on a quick cooldown. That being said, I think it needs to be quicker than 12 seconds. Again, I need to remind you that Lucio and Brig are like the gold standard of the kind of main supports you typically want on your team, and both of them have a 4-second cooldown, extremely strong knockback. So the idea of trying to play a main support who can only knock people back every 12 seconds, or chain them down in this case, that's literally 3 times less uptime on your protective abilities, which means you are 3 times more useless at protecting your backline, which is pretty bad. Again, it's at least not quite that bad because, of course, the CC is stronger at the very least, but yeah, it is not really worth getting a stronger CC to have your one defensive CC ability for protecting your backline be 3 times less available. That is really bad. So I think that's one of the biggest things I want to point out with Mizuki, is while I understand why the devs were cautious with giving him that 12-second chain cooldown, he can't have a 12-second cooldown on chain, at least not in the current way he's designed. You either got to change what this character fundamentally is supposed to do, or you got to make that chain more frequent than that, because that is just not enough uptime to protect your backline. Now you might be pointing out, hang on a minute, doesn't Wu Yang have a super long cooldown knockback? But Wu Yang's fine, why would it be a problem for Mizuki? Well, you see, this is actually one of the reasons that I thought Wu Yang was going to be worse than he ended up being. Because I did think, he's got a really weak knockback, and it's only on a, It was on a 12-second cooldown. I can't remember if it got nerfed to 14. I don't even really pay attention that much anymore. So I think it's 14 seconds, which is ridiculous. That is literally more than 3 times worse than Brig and Lucio, and the CC is worse. So you'd think that Wu Yang would be a terrible main support. However, I think the reason it worked out is because even though it's not a knockback or a traditional CC, his primary fire, in theory, kind of fulfills the same purpose. If you manage to hit a water balloon on someone before they get to engage on you, because you scouted them before the dive began, then they just can't even dive you. It's not literally a knockback, because obviously you don't technically move them, but if you do hit that before they arrive, they just can't dive you. Similarly to if they try to dive you and you knock them away, they can't dive you. It's essentially the same result, it's just a different way of doing it. And the fact that Wu Yang's primary fire is permanent and doesn't have any downtime except for reloads, which don't even happen that often, that's obviously why it kind of works with Wu Yang. It is less consistent having to scout the dive before it happens and prevent it preemptively rather than being able to react to it, but that is kind of compensated for by the fact that your tool to prevent the dive is something you literally always have rather than having to wait for on a cooldown. So yeah, the other main supports all have ways to either prevent a dive before it happens, or to react to a dive by knocking people away and protecting the backline. And then there's Mizuki. And again, he has chain, but is a 12-second cooldown chain enough? And I don't think the answer is yes. I think the answer is a pretty strong no. I hate to say it because I understand how frustrating this could be, but I think the chain cooldown might have to go as low as 8 seconds. I don't know, maybe they have to make the chain duration even shorter. It's only 1.6 seconds or 1.2 seconds for a tank, so it is already quite short, but they could make it a little shorter, I guess. I understand how scary it is to have a support that has that much uptime on CC, but at the end of the day, if you want this guy to be protecting the backline, then he can't have that much downtime on his only defensive ability. So, another point that I think is a big issue with Mizuki is actually something I feel a little vindicated on. You see, there's a criticism I've had of a few recent characters recently, which, to be honest, while I've felt like it doesn't feel like a good thing, I've also felt a little bit unsure if it really matters or not. It feels like it should, but I haven't been able to tell if it's really been an issue. And that is, I feel like a lot of newer characters have been a bit of a mishmash of, everything, in terms of what strategy they're built to be running. It feels like a lot of the characters don't feel like they're designed for a certain kind of team. It feels like it's just throw a bunch of stuff together, and sometimes they end up a bit confused, where they have aspects that would only make sense in a poke team, but then they have aspects that would only make sense in a dive team, but then they also have aspects that would only make sense in a rush team, and it's a bit like, so what do you actually want us to do with this character then? What is the purpose of throwing all these things together? Now, in fairness, there is something to be said about whether that is actually good or bad design. In fairness, while a lot of older designs are much more, heavily one or the other, Zenyatta is very heavily designed for a poke team. He doesn't move around much. He mostly uses long-range damage to fight people off. It's pretty obvious. He can be used in dive, but even then, it was a bit more common back in the old days, but you don't see Zen in dive so much anymore. For the most part, he's a poke support, and he's designed to be a poke support. So, I feel like a lot of the newer characters are a little bit all over the place, where it feels like they have to do a bit of everything, but that can confuse their design, and put us in a position where it's like, okay, so why did you give me this? What did you want me to do with this? Because I would think you want me to do this, but then you have this other ability, which becomes useless if I do that, and it feels like no matter what I do, I can't take advantage of the full character's kit, because the character's own kit is self-contradictory. And I think the worst example of this was Juno. When Juno first came out, while, to be fair, I still think Juno was a lot better designed than a lot of recent supports in recent memory, I still had some problems with her, and the biggest one was this. I did feel like, what the hell do they want us to use Juno for? I mean, she was the first speed boost support in ages, I get that, but just being a new speed boost support alone isn't the whole character. There needs to be a reason why you would use Juno over Lucio for that to make sense. And I feel like they hadn't really given us that reason. And I feel pretty vindicated on that point, honestly, because I know that obviously Juno had her time in the sun, where she has that period where a new character tends to be overtuned for a while when they're brand new, and so they tend to do quite well. But once Juno got put into a position where she's actually relatively well balanced, no one's using her. Everyone's just using Lucio instead, because Lucio is just better. And I feel like this was pretty predictable, honestly, because genuinely, what is the answer to the question, why are you using Juno rather than Lucio? Because, from my perspective, I mentioned in my Juno video that what I would have liked is that while Lucio and Juno provide speed boosts, which are good in both a rush comp and a dive comp, while Lucio can be run in both, he's a bit more well-orientated for a rush comp. I wanted Juno to be sort of like a midpoint between Lucio and Ana, with long-range heals like Ana has, so that she can support a dive without necessarily having to physically be there with them, while also being able to use the speed ring and hopefully shoot it further with this idea of what Juno might be, so that she could give the speed boost to people without having to literally be there with them, so that they can support the dive. That's what I would have liked Juno to be. But that's obviously not really what we got. Instead, we get a bit of a mess. Juno is generally designed as a rush support, but that's already an issue, because Lucio is designed as a rush support that provides speed boosts, so it shouldn't be surprising that Lucio was just better and beat her out, because he has permanent speed and she only has temporary speed. Of course Lucio was going to be better. Now you could argue, oh, but Juno's healing is better than Lucio's, and it kind of is, but honestly, it isn't really. If you haven't paid much attention, Juno's healing is very, very spiky. Her actual blaster provides very little healing unless you are heal botting, which, don't get me wrong, if you do consistently heal with it, the fact that it has so much ammo and so little downtime and it's so easy to heal with it, you can technically get big healing numbers with it, but you're not healing fast, you're just wasting lots of time doing nothing but healing. And so that's going to add up to a large total, but it's not really like the healing you're doing is super effective because it's so slow. And it requires you to be, like, waste so much time you could be doing better things just going brr, brr, brr on your tank. So where Juno actually gets most of her healing from on the games where she does get good healing is either hitting multiple people at once with pulsar torpedoes or getting multiple people at once in her ultimate. That genuinely accounts for like 80% of her healing most of the time. And that's kind of a problem. Because those things not only have loads of downtime, meaning her healing's really inconsistent, but they also require everyone to be standing on top of her, otherwise they don't get anywhere near as much value as they could, and then your healing's terrible, which is a big issue. So because of the fact that Juno actually isn't really better at healing than Lucio is, unless she can use her ultimate or her low uptime pulsar torpedoes, both of which also require the entire team to be clumped on top of her for them to actually get good amounts of healing, means that for the most part, she really can only be used in a rush comp. But that is weird, because there are other aspects of her kit that feel like they're designed for other kind of playstyles. The fact that she has no defensive tools means the main ways that Juno can try and stay alive mid-fight is by either using high ground or distance, which I do think is good and healthy for the game, but it also promotes a pokey playstyle, which, well, you're running her in a rush team. You would never run Juno in a poke team, so it's weird that her main form of survivability is something that would only make sense to do in a poke team. You know? It's very counterintuitive, and it really, like, breaks the interest of your team if to stay alive as Juno, you have to ditch your team and hide on the high ground 5 miles back when your team is trying to run it down mid. It's a really bad idea to have that be her way of surviving. And this is why I was really adamant about the idea of wanting her to be a dive support, because of the fact that dive is the one where you can get a sweet spot, because while obviously dive teams are known for their mobility and aggression, in most dive teams, the backline still plays very slow and pokey. They are just trying to take positions where they have line of sight to the front line so they can heal them mid-dive. That's usually what you want to establish. But the backline still plays very pokey under normal circumstances. So that's what I wanted Juno to be, that Juno positions similarly to an Ana, where she plays the backline in a dive comp, and provides long-range healing and speed boosts, so she can still be aggressive from time to time, but generally speaking, she is using high ground and distance and cover to keep herself alive, in lieu of having some garbage, I hit this button and I instantly get invincibility and don't die. But the nail in the coffin for the dive playstyle is not only that the speed ring is so short range so you can't shoot it to someone far away, but more importantly, that you have severe healing and damage fall off on Juno, which makes it so you have to get close to heal people. But again, if you're up close, then you're just a sitting duck that can die super easily and there's no way for you to stay alive, because the only tool your kit has to stay alive is to run away and use high ground, which you can't do if you're supporting a rush team that's running it down mid. It just feels like the whole kit is self-contradictory. Now, to be fair, at the time, after I released the video, obviously Juno had her time in the sun and did actually do quite well, and I was worried maybe I was wrong giving that take. Maybe there is a point to making characters that have a bit of everything. Because, yeah, sure, it can feel a bit confusing figuring out what you're supposed to do with them because of that, but it does also mean in theory that they're never useless no matter what your team comp is. And yeah, there's kind of a point there, you know, it's the idea I think of trying to make it so they're useful in multiple contexts. But I think in the end, time kind of proved me right. No one really plays Juno anymore, at least not seriously. I mean, people play her for fun, but Juno is not a super great character right now, and it's not even necessarily because her numbers suck or anything. It's mostly just cause Lucio is just better. Lucio is way better at surviving in the context you actually want the speed, is way better at supporting a rush team, and on top of that, kind of has way better kill power, and sometimes even better healing depending on the context. So it just seems like the only thing that Juno has over Lucio is her ultimate. And I would die on that hill. Yeah, I feel like the only thing that Juno ever had over Lucio is that she has a better ultimate. I mean, the whole reason why Juno became meta in the first place when she first came out was literally just that Orbital Ray was such a broken ultimate that you could basically win any team fight with it, as long as people stacked on the Ray when it happened. It was to the point where, at the top levels of play, if someone used Orbital Ray and you couldn't Orbital Ray back, you would basically always give up the fight and just say, yeah, okay, they won. Instant win. There's no way you can win that fight. It's over. GG. They used the Ray. We give up on that fight, we go next. which obviously isn't healthy. To this day, I feel like it's understated just how much Juno is nothing but an orbital ray generator. The only thing that ever makes a Juno good is a good orbital ray. If you don't get a good orbital ray, you are just playing a garbage character for no reason. So I feel like time has kind of proved me right on the point that, overall, while it might have been a nice intention to make her kit a bit more broadly applicable in multiple contexts, it kind of leads to her kit being confused and self-contradictory, and meaning that anyone else who's actually designed to do the job they're supposed to do, like Lucio, rather than having their mechanics be all over the place, just kind of beats her at her own job, because, of course, if you have a character that is designed solely to do one thing, they're going to be better at it than a character that's all over the place, doing a bit of this and a bit of that, and a bit of this and a bit of that. But at the end of the day, the only thing you'd actually ever really want to use them for is to support a rush team, and Lucio's just better at it, you know? Okay, I know that was a lot about Lucio and Juno, but we're coming back to Mizuki now, because he's got a very similar issue in my opinion. Mizuki feels all over the place. At the very least, it's not quite as bad as Juno, because it's pretty definitively obvious that you don't really want to use Mizuki in a very pokey team. He just doesn't have a lot of range. Well, I say that, his range isn't bad, it's 30 meters if I remember correctly. After this point, your glaive just deletes. It's not even like a damage fall off, it just simply dematerializes after 30 meters of travel. So, obviously, that's not terrible range, but it's not enough for a comp that's literally based around long-range fights. Those are usually going to take place at around 40 meters of distance, so you obviously would rather be playing a Bap and a Lari, you get the point. You wouldn't really want to be on Mizuki in a poke team. So, at the very least, we're very clear on whether this guy is going to be used in poke or not. It seems like the answer is a pretty obvious and resounding no. However, whether he's supposed to be used in a rush or a dive team, he seems a bit all over the place, once again. Now, in fairness, there is a place for this. When Hazard was a bit of a midpoint between rush and dive, I didn't consider it a problem. But in fairness, that's because Hazard kind of fulfilled a niche that we didn't really see much of. A tank that can technically sort of dive, quote-unquote, mostly because they can access high ground when most tanks can't. But it wasn't necessarily that they were super fast at it, like most dive tanks are. It was like a slow dive, for lack of a better word. Which, while still, you know, it is a midpoint between rush and dive there, it also does mean it fulfills some kind of niche, you know? That's something we haven't really seen much of before. When it comes to the supports themselves, though, being a bit of a midpoint between dive and rush can be a bit awkward, especially when it's done in this fashion. You see, Mizuki's healing is, once again, highly geared towards AoE heals, healing multiple people at once and getting more value for fighting alongside your entire team. I just think this is a little questionable. In fact, it's a big reason why, before I got my hands on Mizuki, I was worried he would be the worst designed character in this entire update. Of course, now I ended up loving him, in actuality, but I guess I still see a lot of flaws, and I think I was right to be worried about the AoE heals. You see, the main reason the AoE heals hasn't caused much of a problem as I thought is because they are really, really low. And that is better than them being high. You don't want to see what this character would be like if you had high AoE heals. It would basically just be absolute slop if I just stand on my entire team and mash buttons, no one ever dies. Which would not be fun to deal with or play against or play as even. So yeah, it would suck. So it's a good thing we didn't have that issue. But again, the only reason we don't have that issue is because his numbers suck. This guy is terrible at healing. Asterisk. in a normal game. Again, if everyone stacks on top of you, you can still get a lot of healing. That's kind of just the nature of AoE heals. They are literally 5 times better if your whole team stacks on you, which is a pretty big boost. Your healing is always going to be a little bit volatile on these AoE heal characters. But even still, I definitely think that most people are having the experience that they are really struggling to really kill with this character. Sorry, not kill with this character, although they are struggling to kill with this character as well. They're really struggling to keep their teammates alive with this character in a lot of contexts. Because while it is nice to think, oh yeah, the whole team will just stack on top of me and we'll go in as a team and we'll run them over, in reality, it's not even like a, oh, screw my team, they're splitting up when they shouldn't, although that sometimes happens. A lot of the time it's just more, oh, if we all like run it down mid in one big blob, it's actually really easy to surround us and blow us up and kill us for being extremely dumb and just going in as one big clump. So people kinda have to split. It's what the game's all about, is taking off angles and making space off of that. You have to split at least a little bit to play the game. But when you split, this character gets absolutely nothing in terms of resources, which sucks for him. So, yeah. I think the AoE heals are a little confusing, because it would make sense if this guy is once again intended to just be a rush support. And part of me thinks maybe he was supposed to be a rush support. Because, I mean, he's got a CC ability, pretty decent if you're going to be playing, like, Rush. He has these bouncing shots, which are better in close range because of the fact that, well, you know, they bounce, so if you're in a tight corridor, you've got a really good chance of catching someone, without, even if you, like, were going to miss, it might bounce and save you, you know? And obviously, AoE heals always best in Rush when people are the most grouped up and just running it down mid. Good to see. The problem is that, I'm going to be honest with you, because of the fact that there's a lot of supports that can provide AoE heals alone are not enough to justify playing Mizuki. You have to take advantage of his other parts of his kit, and that's fine, except for to do that, you have to play him more like a dive support. You have to take off angles with him and play aggressively with him, but if you're going to take off angles and play aggressively with him, that means you're not going to be healing anyone. Because, well, one, you're probably going to be alone, but two, even if people come with you, if it's an off angle, you can only have one, maybe two people come with you at best. Two is really stretching it, because you still need people to hold the front line, otherwise it's not an off angle, it's just where the new front line is. So, usually you're either going to be alone or on the off angle with only one other person, and obviously that either means you're healing no one or healing one person with abilities that are balanced around the idea of healing multiple people at once, which is not great. So, yeah, you're in this horrible position where, to get value off of this character, you simultaneously have to play on off angles constantly and use your Katashira return to go for, like, oh, there's an enemy behind here that needs chaining, okay, yoink, and then teleport back, and then, okay, right, I got that nice chain, now my team shoots them while they're chained down and they die, you know, stuff like that. You need to be doing stuff like that, but then if you're doing stuff like that, you can't AoE heal, and you need to be AoE healing as well, and there isn't really a way to have your Kate and it too. You can't have both. And to be honest, I can't tell. I feel like it might be intentional. I feel like it's like, oh, they don't see it as a bug. It's a feature that you can't do both at once. That you have to choose, oh, am I DPSing and off-angling, or am I heal-botting? I feel like that's the idea, especially because there's a lot of downtime in both playstyles with Mizuki. There's a lot of time where if you've just started playing aggressively, you've got to wait a while before you can be a heal bot again. And a lot of times where if you just try and heal bot, you're just going to run out of hats really quickly and then have loads of seconds of just, oh, guess I can't do anything. Guess I'm off-angling now. I think there's something here, this cycle of, okay, go off-angle, okay, your cooldowns like need some time to come back, so now go heal your team, okay, go back to off-angling, now go heal your team. There's an interesting sort of cycle there that shows some promise, but it's just like, neither of these things provide enough value to justify picking this character over a Lucio or a Brig, unless you are doing both of them simultaneously, which is borderline impossible. So, yeah. That seems to be one of the biggest issues with this character. I think the last nail in the coffin is his ultimate as well, which is a shame. You see, I kind of wonder what the consensus on this ultimate is going to be, because it's kind of technically really strong, I think. The problem is there's not really a coherent, consistent way to use its strength. So it's in this weird limbo where it's technically insanely strong, but you can't actually use it to do anything good. What I mean by that is, of course, it is Kakai Sanctuary, you probably already saw, but it deletes bullets that try to enter it, and it heals people inside it. And you can place it where you like a tree, and it could be like, oh, I'm going to attack here, and it's like, place the Sanctuary and jump in, start brawling and all that. But here's the problem. Oh. I thought it was on the walkway, never mind, I put it in midair. The problem with this ultimate is that you really want to use this aggressively. If you can use this aggressively to actually take space, it's amazing. But that's the problem. How do you actually take space with this ultimate? Like, already I compared it to Tree, and Tree already has a big issue, where when you place a tree, you're often put in the situation where, like, it's hard to place it forward, for lack of a better way of putting it, so that you're actually getting space off of it, and if you're not getting space off of it, it can only be used defensively. And historically, any ultimate that can only be used defensively is pretty bad. Like, it can be good, but generally speaking, it does pretty poorly, especially as you get to higher skill levels. So, Kakai Sanctuary, I know the obvious use is, I'm taking damage, boom, Sanctuary, I'm alive now, kind of like how bad Life Weavers just use Tree to save themselves. Similar thing here, where people will just use Sanctuary to keep themselves alive, and I know that's the obvious use, but I really feel like that's the bad way to use the ultimate. That being said, I can't really blame people for doing it, because using the ultimate well to actually make space is so awkward. Because of the fact that, as you probably already know, if the enemy stands inside the Sanctuary, then the bullets don't get deleted. It's only when they try to leave or enter the Sanctuary that they get deleted. So, if the Sanctuary is placed too close to the enemies, they can just walk inside. And that's a big problem for you. So, as a result, Kakai's Sanctuary gets put in this weird spot where, like, you want to place it forward. You want to, like, I don't know, there's a corner you're going to try and take, and you don't want to place it where you're standing. You want to place it on the corner so you can swing the corner and fight and take it. Stuff like that. It does kind of work, but it does feel really clunky because of the fact the further the enemies are from the Sanctuary, the more reliably you'll be able to get value off of it. But again, you have to place it closer to the enemies to actually make space with it, and if you don't make space with it, it's not really a very useful ultimate. So it's a bit of an awkward one. Now, in fairness, the Sanctuary can still be kind of useful even if the enemies are inside it, because you can start like wiggling in and out like this, and you can shield dance effectively, but clearly that is less useful than it just blocking every bullet every time. So yeah, it's awkward. I do think this ultimate needs work. I don't necessarily hate the idea, but I just think this needs to be able to be used more offensively, more consistently. Funnily enough, I was watching Lane Hemingway's take on this character, and essentially, they actually made a suggestion, which is almost the exact thing I suggested for Life Weaver Tree. They were saying that he feels like the ultimate should do something to enemies inside it, even something small, like a slow. Which is funny, because literally since Life Weaver's release, I've been advocating for the idea that his tree should slow enemies, because, like, otherwise it's just got no utility. It's just a big heal bomb, and we have too many of those. So that's really, really funny to me, that we both basically had the same idea, just for a different character. But yeah, anyway. Overall, that's kind of how I feel about Mizuki, is that I do think he's really fun. I do think he's kind of underrated. I do think the chain is a great CC ability. It's super fun to use, and it is super strong if used effectively. But I also do think that they need to pick a lane with this character. They need to decide, okay, are we wanting this guy to off-angle a bunch and be a super divey support that, like, takes side angles so that we kind of have great map control, and then just intermittently heals in the breaks in between where he's waiting for his cooldowns to come back? Or do we want this character to be a heal bot that sits down main and pumps heals into everyone? I know, again, you can switch between the two, but the problem with that is if you're playing a dive comp, then there isn't much of a main. Like, there is, but it's constantly moving, and you probably won't be able to keep up with it, so you won't be getting good AoE heals. And if you're playing just a rush comp, then you're not going to be able to get as much value off the off-angling, because your team isn't going to be off-angling, and you're actually going to be kind of creating a weak spot for your team by splitting from them in a composition where you're supposed to stick together. So, yeah, I understand that these are two different playstyles you can switch between, but those two different playstyles support different comps, and you can't just switch the comps mid-game. So that's kind of my issue with the character. One last thing I will mention is, this is obviously would make a lot of sense if this is going to be more of a duelist character like Kiriko, that's going to be more of a divey support, but I will say this, I know that some people would say that he needs to get more damage. He does not do a lot of damage with the Spirit Glaive. It is literally only 30 damage, plus a 30 extra damage over time. It can headshot for double damage, so it's 90 if you headshot, but 90 genuinely is not that great for a headshot, especially when 2/3 of it is as a damage over time that takes time and gives people time to run to a health pack or get healed. So, yeah. Not to mention that you can't stack the damage over time. At least, okay, I must admit, I'm talking off the top of my head right now, but I'm pretty sure in Overwatch, all damage over time effects don't stack, they reset. So essentially, if you have, like, I don't know, a burning effect that lasts 3 seconds, and after 1 second you set them on fire again, that just adds an extra second. It takes you from 2 seconds left to back to 3 seconds left. It doesn't add an extra 3 seconds and set it to 5, if you know what I mean. So the fact that the DOT, it is a short one to be fair, but the fact that it just refreshes it rather than stacking it does mean that obviously the damage isn't the best. Now, some people would make the argument that he needs more damage for that reason, that Mizuki should be able to duel people more effectively and kill them easily. I'm going to be honest, I like it where it is. If anything, I would like them, if they're going to do anything, just nudge the damage over time a little bit higher. And especially the damage over time. I don't want him to be bursty. I know that some people want that, I don't want it. I think that, I mean, you know, I think Kiriko is literally the worst design character to ever be made in Overwatch. I really need to make a second Kiriko rant video at this rate, but that's a can of worms for another time. I think that Kiriko was a mistake. I think that the millions of changes they've had to make to this character to make them more bearable, and they're still one of the most despised characters in the game, is a good example of exactly why she was such a mistake. I don't want this guy to be Kiriko too. I don't want this guy to be doing the same thing Kiriko does, of, oh, okay, I'm just going to drop on top of your head, and then dink, dink, haha, you're dead. Oh, also, I can be invincible whenever I want, and teleport away whenever I want, and also I have CC. That sounds nightmarish. Let's not do that. I would rather this character be decent at dueling, but not be able to burst people down. Like, I'm fine with him doing good damage, but I want his damage to be a slow burn, where he bleeds people out in fights, rather than just, haha, surprise, you're dead. You know, that's... I would like him to stay the way he is for the most part right now. I just want him to be able to, I guess, support his team better. I want him to be able to keep a tank alive a little bit better, even when his AoE heals aren't necessarily hitting loads of people. And I want his CC to have more uptime, which usually is a sentence I'd be terrified of saying, but I just think in this case it's kind of necessary. Okay, so in terms of direct changes, I know I've kind of already given you an idea, but other than reducing the cooldown of the chain, I think I would like to see his mobility. Let me see, was his mobility? Yeah, it was 12 seconds, Christ. Yeah, his mobility, they're both 12 seconds, that's insane! Yeah, okay, his mobility needs to come down to like 7 seconds, genuinely. Maybe I'm... No, okay, right, to be fair, I don't think Kiriko TP should be at 7 seconds, but I just want to point out Kiriko TP's at 7 seconds and this is at 12. What the actual hell? On what planet do we give this ability a 12-second cooldown when it is so much more counterable and fair than Swift Step is? And then Swift Step, the OP version of it, is a 7-second cooldown. Like, what the hell? So yeah, okay, right. This goes down to like 7 or 8 seconds. Chain goes down to 8, maybe 9 seconds, I don't know. I don't want to say 10, because I feel like that's still too little uptime, but I do realize how scary loads of CC is. And I think his hat needs its numbers shifted. So his hat, of course, the healing caster, why am I looking everywhere except where the hat is? It has less healing per bounce, which I think was a smart move. I think if this did the same healing on each bounce, this would be an impossible balancing nightmare. However, I still think they haven't taken it far enough. The amount of healing that the hat provides only goes down by 20 with each bounce. I'm going to be real with you. I just think that is still a bad idea. This is still a bit of a balancing nightmare, because Healing Casa is a god-awful ability if you're using it to heal your tank, which is what you're going to be doing 90% of the time. Because it is literally you right-click to heal your tank for 90 HP, and then you have to wait, 6 seconds to do it again? That gives you some of the worst healing per second in the entire game. You are terrible at keeping a tank up. But here's the problem. Obviously, the idea is, you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to AoE heal. But again, 90% of Overwatch comps, the tank needs 10 trillion heals, and everyone else needs a little bit of heals. 90% of the healing you're doing will be pumped into the tank. I'm not saying that's the way I like it, that's just the way the game is right now. And so, a lot of the times, I have the same experience of trying to do everything I can to wait for a good time to use Healing Casa, but our comp just does not support people grouping up. And so because it doesn't, I have to constantly use this ability to throw at no one but my tank, and my tank is still dying as I'm spamming hats at them, because my healing sucks if it's single target. I have had so many experiences with a Ryan that pins in there, and then thinks they can just hold shield and walk it back and get pocketed and live, and I am there like, okay, I've maxed my healing aura, I'm staying on top of you, I'm chaining the people that are chasing you, and I've thrown all of my hats at you, but you're still dead. And I can't fix that. That is all the healing and support I can give. That is everything my character has to try and save your life, and you're still dead. And obviously, on some level, that is like, that's the tank's fault or whatever. But again, if you're talking games with randoms, that's gonna happen a lot. I'm not even necessarily saying the Ryans in these games are stupid. They at least have the sense to hold shield and walk backwards when they overextend a little bit, and everyone overextends sometimes. And most supports could at least bail them out a little, as long as the overextension wasn't too bad. But even if they only just overextend a little, when I'm playing Mizuki, I can't help them. I just can't. I just keep throwing the hats at them, and they still die. So yeah, I think the healing of Healing Casa needs to be increased even further, but the bounce reduction needs to also be increased a lot more. I think it should be that every single hat bounce halves the healing of the next target. So I would say, I don't know, the numbers aren't that important, but I would say let's try a 120 heal hat. I still think that might be low. I genuinely think you could try 150, but it would be like 120 heal, bounce, 60 heal, bounce, 30 heal, bounce, 15 heal. Something like that. That makes it so much easier to balance as well, because you get diminishing returns, and for the most part, the main bounce that matters would be the second bounce, which you can much more consistently get at least one hat bounce. Getting one hat bounce with Healing Casa, it doesn't happen every time, but is not that uncommon. The main issue is when you need 2 bounces to get value off of this, and you just can't do it, because your team comp is not designed to support that kind of playstyle. It just sucks when that's the case. Lastly, just to cap this off, it's a little bit off topic, but I may as well mention it because I have opinions on it. let's talk about his perks. Overall, I am relatively happy with his perk selection. I'm pretty happy with most of the perks, actually, in the new 5 characters. I think the only one I don't like is Territorial. And even then, I don't like it from a design perspective, but I do think it is a very strong perk that I do pick in most of my games. Anyway, when it comes to Mizuki, for his minor perk, you either get Wellspring or Exposed Soul. Wellspring makes it so that the healing aura charge you get from dealing damage and throwing your hats is boosted by 25%, so you can reach maximum healing charge faster. Exposed Soul, on the other hand, makes it so that hitting an enemy with Binding Chain increases your damage dealt to them by 30% for 2 seconds. Now, I've heard, actually, a bit of a split opinion on which of these is better. So, I'm just going to take Exposed Soul to demonstrate it. The Remedy Aura one is a little bit less important to demonstrate. Just so you know, this is how fast it usually goes up if I just, spam damage on characters. And obviously, if I took the perk, it'd be 25% faster, so you can kind of get an idea. Meanwhile, the Chain perk, usually it's 1, 2, 3 to kill this guy, and 1, 2, 3 to kill this guy. Chain, 1, 2, dead. And that's pretty good. So, I'll talk about my opinion of these perks. First of all, just design-wise, I mostly like them. I mean, you could say the resource generation just being boosted is a bit basic and bland, but I still kind of like it. Especially because if you are playing a team where you can AoE heal people a lot with this character, then obviously having your maximum heal or having a higher uptime from charging faster is really nice to have. And then the other perk supports the other playstyle, which I do appreciate, with it increasing your DPS output and making you a better duelist if you're fighting to take off angles so that your team gets more angles and space to use. Now, here's my preference. I feel like it is very, very close. The faster charging for Remedy Aura was the one that I stuck with initially, because of the fact that, well, I just thought AoE heal's a big value, it's free healing, it's so good. And don't get me wrong, extra damage on Chain is nice, but while I am going to be dueling on this character, I'm not going to be dueling all the time, and it is only 30% damage, and it is only for me. So at first, I was more of an enjoyer of the other perk. However, now, I must admit, I'm switching over a bit, and the big reason why is because even without the resource generation perk, you tend to get max resources relatively quickly. I'm not saying the resource generation is not valuable at all. Definitely when you have more pokey, skirmishy fights where people are very non-committal in and out, you're going to have more times where if you don't have that resource generation, it will actually cost you healing. But when you get into really messy, really long team fights, which is the main thing this character is built for anyway with all these AoE heals, it is just going to be that you're at 4 times healing for almost the entire fight, regardless of whether you took the perk or not. So if you are going to mostly get your hands dirty in long, drawn-out team fights at close range, then for the most part, you don't really need to take that minor perk, and it is better to just be a more effective duelist by taking the Chain perk. But either way, it's a pretty good decision. For the major perks, we got 2 options, and I'm going to be real with you, I pick the same one every time. You see, you do have the option to take Resonant Return, which makes it so that your healing Casa, the hat, bounces 1 additional time, and each bounce increases the healing output of the hat by 10. However, I already mentioned, it is a nightmare trying to get a comp where people play grouped up enough that you can actually get all that healing. And don't get me wrong, you probably would take it if you were playing a true Death Ball comp, but even most rush comps that are a little bit Death Ball-y usually don't full commit to the Death Ball, and for that reason, you don't really get a whole lot of value off of it, in my opinion, in most cases. The better perk in general is the one where if you are using Katashira Return while the speed boost is active, everyone in your healing aura also gets a 25% speed boost, which is the same as Lucio Speed without Amp, which is really useful. It actually finally gives this character some decent utility. It's just a shame that it's a major perk, so it comes so late. Not to mention the uptime on it isn't great, considering this is a 12-second cooldown, and the actual, speed boost lasts for 6 seconds, which is not super long. So, yeah. Anyway, those are my opinions on his perks. That's my opinion on Mizuki as he is right now. Hopefully, he will get buffed, but I must admit, I feel like it might just be a general design problem. I think the easiest way you fix this character is you just change the hat. I think the hat is just terrible. I think it's funny, it's cool conceptually, but just gameplay-wise, it's awful. I hate it. It's the only thing about this character I don't like. I think you really want to lean into that off-angly playstyle where you're jumping around off angles and sneaking around corners and then chaining people and teleporting out. And in fact, I mentioned earlier that I don't even want it to burst kill. I just realized I didn't get to the end of that point. what I've taken to doing on this character, which I appreciate, is not necessarily trying to jump people to get the kill, but trying to jump people from off angles just to chain them and then TP out, and then have my teammates finish them off while they're chained to the ground. That's what I really like doing, is basically setting up my team for a free kill, rather than me necessarily having to be the one who gets all the kills, and like be a solo DPS support. That's what I really want to see out of this character. I want to see them exemplify that playstyle, and I want him to truly feel like he is flexible in terms of his healing output. I don't want it to feel like it's just, you AoE heal, and if you can't do that, you suck, you know? If they want to do with this whole, oh, well, he's got a bit of everything going on, then they need to make him actually decent at a bit of everything. He has to be able to single-target heal a tank to at least a serviceable standard. I know that sounds a bit hard of a tall order, but genuinely, I would say in a current state, Brig can do that. Obviously, ideally, you shouldn't, but I do think that Brig's heal packs are in a position where they're pretty good at keeping a tank up, at least until they get to a better position or the other support comes back, who usually is more well-suited for keeping them up. With all that said, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.